For years, the Volkswagen Bora lived in somebody else's shadow. It shared its platform with the Golf, its engines with the Golf, and in many people's minds, it was simply a Golf with a trunk. But that's not the whole story. Because hidden behind that simple description was a car that would earn the trust of millions of drivers, survive hundreds of thousands of kilometers, and become one of the defining Volkswagens of the early 2000s. The strange thing is that the Bora was never supposed to become a legend. When Volkswagen introduced it in 1998, the company's expectations were actually quite simple. The Golf was already one of the most successful cars in Europe, and Volkswagen wanted a sedan version for buyers who preferred a traditional four-door shape. On paper, the formula looked easy. Take everything people loved about the Golf Mk4, add a separate trunk, make the design a little more mature, and sell it to a slightly older audience. But the moment the Bora arrived, it became clear that Volkswagen had done more than simply add a trunk. The company was in the middle of one of the most ambitious periods in its history. Ferdinand Piëch was pushing engineers harder than ever before, demanding levels of quality that many believed were excessive. Volkswagen wasn't satisfied with being known only for practical cars. It wanted to move closer to the premium brands. It wanted customers to feel something special when they stepped into one of its vehicles. And the Bora became one of the clearest examples of that philosophy. Unlike many compact sedans of the era, the Bora didn't feel cheap. The doors closed with a solid thud. The dashboard felt substantial. The controls moved with precision. The materials looked and felt far more expensive than buyers expected from a Volkswagen. Even today, when you sit inside a well-kept Bora, there is a sense that the car came from a different era, an era when engineers often had more influence than accountants. Volkswagen even gave the Bora its own personality. While the Golf was aimed at a broad audience, the Bora looked more serious. The front end was completely different, featuring unique headlights, a distinctive grille, and a more formal appearance. It looked like a small executive sedan rather than a practical hatchback. That may sound like a small difference, but it completely changed how people saw the car. Young professionals who felt a Golf was too youthful suddenly had another option. Families who wanted something more elegant than a hatchback found exactly what they were looking for. The Bora occupied a unique position in the market. It wasn't trying to compete directly with luxury cars, but it offered a taste of that experience at a much more accessible price. Then came the engines. And this is where the Bora truly started building its reputation. Volkswagen offered a wide range of powertrains, from economical gasoline engines to larger V6 units, but one engine would eventually become almost inseparable from the car itself: the legendary 1.9 TDI. To understand the Bora's success, you have to understand what that engine meant at the time. Fuel economy mattered. Reliability mattered. Running costs mattered. And the 1.9 TDI delivered all three. It wasn't glamorous. It didn't produce an exciting soundtrack. But it did something far more important. It worked. Day after day. Year after year. Hundreds of thousands of kilometers passed beneath its wheels. Families used them. Taxi companies used them. Sales representatives used them. Small business owners used them. The Bora became the kind of car people depended on. And that's how legends are often born, not through speed, but through trust. Across Europe, the Bora quietly gained a reputation for being the car that would always get you home. Owners began sharing stories of extraordinary mileage. Mechanics learned the strengths and weaknesses of the platform. Entire communities formed around maintaining and preserving these cars. But perhaps nowhere did the Bora leave a bigger mark than in Eastern Europe. During the early 2000s, a Bora represented something important. It wasn't a luxury car, yet it felt prestigious. It wasn't expensive compared to a BMW or Mercedes, yet it carried a certain status. For many people, buying a Bora meant they had made it. It was the car parked proudly in front of a new house. The car used for family road trips across countries. The car that accompanied people through some of the most important years of their lives. And while most buyers chose the sensible diesel versions, Volkswagen had another surprise hidden in the lineup. A surprise that made absolutely no sense in a compact family sedan. A narrow-angle six-cylinder engine known as the VR6. And once that engine arrived, the Bora's story became even more interesting. The VR6 was the moment the Bora stopped being just a sensible sedan and became something far more interesting. Because if you looked at a Bora from the outside, you would never expect what Volkswagen engineers were hiding under the hood. Most examples were diesel-powered family cars driven by commuters and business owners. They were practical, economical, and predictable. Then there was the VR6. At first glance, it made absolutely no sense. Why would Volkswagen put a six-cylinder engine into a compact sedan that most people associated with fuel economy and reliability? The answer lies in the late 1990s, when Volkswagen was becoming increasingly ambitious. Ferdinand Piëch wasn't interested in playing it safe. He wanted Volkswagen to prove that it could build cars that were not only practical but genuinely exciting. And the VR6 engine was one of the most unique power plants in the automotive world. Unlike a traditional V6, which used a wider angle between cylinder banks, the VR6 used an incredibly narrow angle design. This allowed Volkswagen to package 6 cylinders into a space that was barely larger than some 4-cylinder engines. It was an engineering solution that looked strange on paper but worked brilliantly in reality. More importantly, it gave the Bora a character completely different from the diesel models that dominated sales charts. Start a Bora VR6 and immediately you knew this wasn't an ordinary Volkswagen. The sound was deeper, smoother, and far more aggressive than anyone expected from a compact family sedan. Press the accelerator and the car delivered performance that could surprise much more expensive vehicles. For enthusiasts, the Bora VR6 became a hidden gem. To most people it looked like an ordinary sedan. To those who knew what was under the hood, it was something special. Yet despite the excitement surrounding the VR6, the real strength of the Bora remained its versatility. Very few cars could be so many things to so many different people. One owner could use a Bora as a reliable daily commuter, driving hundreds of kilometers every week without a second thought. Another could use it as a family car. Another could modify it into a performance machine. The platform seemed capable of doing almost everything. And that's one of the reasons the Bora developed such a loyal following. It adapted to people's lives rather than forcing people to adapt to the car. By the early 2000s, the Bora had become a familiar sight almost everywhere. In Germany, it was respected as a solid compact sedan. In Western Europe, it became a common choice for professionals who wanted something more mature than a hatchback. But in Eastern Europe, the Bora achieved something very different. It became aspirational. During that period, a clean Bora parked outside your house sent a message. It wasn't as expensive as a Mercedes. It wasn't as flashy as a BMW. But it represented success. It represented stability. It represented the idea that you had worked hard and bought something genuinely good. This reputation only grew stronger as used examples began spreading across the region. Suddenly, thousands of people who could never afford a new German car found themselves behind the wheel of a Bora. And many of them discovered why the car had earned such respect. The build quality felt solid. The engines felt durable. The interior still looked modern years after production. Even when mileage climbed higher and higher, the Bora continued doing exactly what it had always done. It kept going. That's something many modern cars struggle to achieve. New vehicles often impress buyers with technology, giant screens, and endless features. The Bora impressed people in a much simpler way. It earned their trust. Over time, that trust became its greatest strength. Owners recommended them to friends. Mechanics recommended them to customers. Entire online communities appeared dedicated to maintaining, restoring, and modifying these cars. The Bora slowly transformed from a simple compact sedan into a cultural icon for an entire generation of drivers. And perhaps the most surprising part is that it accomplished all of this while living in the Golf's shadow. The Golf received most of the headlines. The GTI received most of the attention. The R32 became the poster car. Yet while everyone was watching those models, the Bora was quietly building one of the strongest reputations in Volkswagen history. By the time production finally came to an end, millions of people had experienced the car firsthand. And that's when the real legacy of the Bora began. Because long after it disappeared from dealerships, it remained on roads, in driveways, and in memories. The little sedan that everyone called just a Golf with a trunk had become much more than that. And its final chapter would explain exactly why so many people still remember it today. And maybe that's why the Volkswagen Bora is still remembered today. Not because it was the fastest car Volkswagen ever built. Not because it was the rarest. And not because it changed the automotive world overnight. The Bora became special for a much simpler reason. It showed up when people needed it, and it never stopped doing its job. It carried families across countries, helped young professionals build their lives, survived brutal winters, endless highway miles, and years of daily use. For some owners, it was their first real German car. For others, it was the car that proved reliability and quality didn't have to come with a luxury badge. While the Golf became the hero of magazine covers and the GTI became the dream of enthusiasts, the Bora quietly built something even more valuable: trust. Decades later, thousands of them are still on the road, still starting on cold mornings, still carrying people to work, and still reminding drivers of an era when cars felt built to last. And perhaps that's the greatest irony of all. The Volkswagen Bora spent its entire life living in the shadow of the Golf. Yet for millions of people around the world, especially across Eastern Europe, it became far more than a Golf with a trunk. It became a symbol of progress, reliability, and a better chapter in life. Volkswagen never intended to create a legend when it built the Bora. They simply wanted a practical sedan. But somewhere between the solid German engineering, the legendary 1.9 TDI, the unforgettable VR6, and millions of kilometers traveled across countless roads, the Bora became something much bigger. It became one of those rare cars that people don't remember because they owned one. They remember it because it was everywhere. And sometimes, that's exactly how legends are made.